Julie Dunlap is a learning specialist at Beacon College, the nation's first accredited college or university dedicated to educating students with learning and attention issues. And she's a master's trained speech language pathologist with 22 years of clinical experience supporting neurodiverse children, teens, and college students. She helps families and educators understand learning differences, build self-advocacy skills, and create practical strategies for success in school and life nationwide today. Susan Fitzel is a nationally recognized neurodiversity speaker, educator, and author of 16 books on learning and motivation. With more than 30 years of experience, and as a neurodivergent parent herself, she helps families and schools better understand how differently wired brains learn, communicate, and thrive when supported the right way. Kim Zajac is a speech-language pathologist and audiologist with 30 years of professional experience. As an architect of access, she integrates design thinking, technology, and collaboration to ensure access and inclusion. As a K-12 educator, national speaker, and thought partner, Kim serves to create transformational learning and life experiences. And we're going to begin our conversation with Julie Dunlap. Many parents sense something's off long before there's a label. From your work with teens and college students, what early signs at home or in school suggest that this is not just not paying attention?
Thank you, Daryl. That's a great question. Parents do struggle to recognize and make sure that they understand the signs when they have them. Some of the things they might notice with their children, they come home from school exhausted because they've had to work so hard to understand what's going on in the classroom. In addition, they might ask what a lot whenever you give them a direction or say something to them. You might see meltdowns during homework time or times that they have to work on things from the class. You're going to see inconsistent attention. Like they're able to focus really well on the things that they enjoy and are into, like their video games and YouTubes and things like that. But when it comes to following a directive or information that they're not as familiar with or comfortable with, it's going to be a really hard struggle for them to remain focused. You also might see behaviors in the classroom. They might be acting out a little bit, but if they have a one-on-one session and individualized attention, then that focus or that behavior is not present.
So Susan, parents often hear, they heard you, they just aren't listening. How do you help families understand the difference between they won't listen and they can't process what they're hearing?
I think one of the things we need to remember is if a child has auditory processing difficulty, which mimics ADHD. So a lot of times we think they're not paying attention, they're not focused on us, they're not listening like they're supposed to, but in reality, they can't. They may not even hear what's coming at them. And that could be because of background noise. They can't hear in background noise. It could be because they're really focused on one thing and they blocked everything else so they can focus. Cognitive overload. It's too much at once. I mean, I also have central auditory processing disorder, so I can totally relate. Even now, today in the gym, if the trainer with all the background noise and the rock and roll music says, hey, I want you to do 20 reps. And if he gives me 4 or 5 instructions in a row, I can't do it. He's got to give me one at a time or I'm not going to be able to remember what he said, because I need a visual, I need a chart, I need a flow chart, I need tools. It's not deliberate. It's just the brain can't hold it all together. And sometimes we need to physically do something in order to remember it. So I think it's just, we have this expectation that everybody should be able to focus and pay attention, but depending on how our brains are wired, that may not be the case. We're not all going to get all the signals clearly from our auditory processing and the way our brain works. It may mean that we need some other little strategies to kind of help us get there.
Well, Susan, thank you so much for sharing your personal experience with APD. Kimberly, you've worked closely with middle schoolers and high schoolers who are dealing with auditory processing challenges. What are some of the common concerns that parents have that end up ultimately being tied to auditory processing disorder?
I really love that we're bringing the parent perspective into the fold here. Our parents are receiving the learners we work with all day long at home at the end of a very long and busy day at school. And so one of the things I hear the most about is when students arrive home, they almost reach a point of listening fatigue, where the capacity of their system to continue to listen and process auditory information reaches its limit. Right? It's sort of a capacity and demand situation, and there's just no more reserve left for the extra things that extend beyond the school day. And that's very challenging for parents receiving their students home, because they want to talk and listen and hear about the day and what learning had occurred and what was something that it was exciting for the student, and maybe what was more challenging. And so this is sometimes tricky for parents to sort of work with and figure out how to get on the other side of in a positive way for everyone. Another thing that I hear and myself have encountered as a parent of two young ladies is selective hearing. Parents will sometimes say, my students come home from school and it seems like, they only want to listen to what they're interested in. And so what this really is signaling, again, it pairs with that auditory fatigue. They've been working at high demand all day long in their home. That is their comfort zone. It's where they can let their guard down. And really, it's not necessarily reflective of avoidance per se. I believe that there's actually a component there that's related to a temporal processing limitation. And so like physically, the body signals itself to slow down. And so that's where the selectivity comes into play. Another thing I think also comes into play for parents is describing students as being vague communicators. I ask them how their day was at school, and I don't really get much, and I get a lot of filler and sort of non-specific responses. And again, I think this comes down to it really being a showing of the temporal processing challenges that our students with auditory processing disorders face. It's difficult for them to tune in to all of the details and to remember with specificity in any moment what might have been covered across the span of a 7-hour school day. So parents work very hard with their students to support their learning, and these are definitely some areas that can pop up at home that are in need of support, and that is what we hope to do at school, is to provide students and parents with what they need to be successful in overcoming these challenges.
All right, thank you. So, Julie, parents often say that mornings and homework are the hardest, most difficult times. What are some simple changes that parents can implement at home that can ease frustration for children who have difficulties processing spoken instructions?
Right. Well, it's always great to add as many modalities of that information input as possible. If we're just speaking to our students or our children and expecting them to remember and recall everything, if that message isn't getting in, we also need to have a way for them to see this, and maybe even use visual schedules to do that. As a child, young children, you might want to start those visual schedules with pictures, and then move into more of word-based schedules, eventually moving to where they can utilize a calendar on their phone or a calendar on their refrigerator, to-do lists that way that they can see them regularly. You also want to make sure that your child is understanding what you're asking them to do, and that they're hearing all the directions. And you're not going to just say, "Did you understand me?" Because that's not really going to get to the point of the conversation. You might want them to repeat back the things that they need to do to make sure that they did get everything. Another thing that we want to do is we want to model and use these supports ourselves so that we make it seem more normalized. Like, I don't have such a different way of doing things as everybody else. I know that I need these supports, but I know a lot of people do too. And that makes it easier for children to understand and to model your behavior. It's important for you to also cue important information. Let them know ahead of time that you need their attention. So you might call their name and then say the direction and say, "This was important. Can you respond to that and let me know what you heard?" Also, you might want to make sure that you're using magic to-do lists. There are programs such as Goblin Tools that can help with this, that will help children and adults break down steps into manageable pieces if you give them a task that they need to do.
So, Susan, you talk about teaching in ways that match how kids' brains work. What's one parent cheat code for giving them directions that actually stick when verbal information feels overwhelming?
Well, to build on what's already been said by the other two speech pathologists in the room, which are the people who've given me so much to help me and my child when I was raising my son, it's chunk it. Chunk it and use visual cues. So if you've got 5 instructions, make sure they're 5 clear instructions, and you might even have the picture cues. And we think picture cues only for small children. They're also very good for older children. They just might be more sophisticated. When I was teaching high school, I might use anime picture cues. That was cool at that time, as opposed to little cartoons. So you want to chunk the information. You want to have visual cues. Checklists are great. If you've got things that you want your child to do at home you're saying they never get XYZ done, put a list and a checklist on a whiteboard. It could be on the refrigerator, in their bedroom, wherever they need it. They can check off things as they do them. That is fabulous. And then when they check it off, it feels good. I got that done. They get a dopamine hit. It's kind of nice. So it's a matter of figuring out, how does your child or your teen, because it's not just young children, how do their brains work and what seems to be most successful? And to be honest, all the things that have been suggested so far all work. However, not all work all the time. So if you're listening to this and you try something and it doesn't work with your child, it just might be, okay, that didn't work with my child, but it might work with somebody else. I will use something different. So I guess the cheat code is be patient, give small bits of information at a time, use visual cues and checklists when you need to. Those are the top ones, I would say, without overwhelming too much information.
All right, thank you. So, Kimberly, I wanted to put a finer point on some of the things we've discussed so far in our conversation. From your therapy experience, what helps most during homework time? Is it fewer words, more visuals, written steps, or something parents might not even anticipate or expect?
This is a great question. And I think starting with one thing, which is the obvious, just the nature of the words home and work put together, homework. After working all day at school and really, pushing the limits of their auditory processing abilities, students are fatigued. And so I like to reframe homework as more of home agency or home empowerment. And so really helping students not look ahead to the afternoon or the evening as a daunting time, but one of developing skills for life. And so with that, I consider the basic thing of looking at your environment. How can we set up the home empowerment time to be set up in a way that is productive and not a heavy lift? So that includes looking at the area in which you'll set up to do your work, making sure that it's a distraction-free environment. Perhaps it means wearing some noise-canceling headphones. It may mean, positioning a chair so it's not facing out a window or in another direction toward something distracting. So setting up the environment for success and reframing homework as more of a home empowerment or home agency exercise. I do think looking, as some folks have mentioned already today, looking at the structure of the time and making things more visual. So having almost like a schedule where you can have your learner or your child outline the order in which they would like to approach the things that they will be reviewing and targeting in this time, and building in breaks, right? So building in some breaks for just auditory rest. We don't need to approach home empowerment time as something that is a complete 60-minute block. It can be broken up into creative segments, and what works for one student, as mentioned earlier, may not work for all. And so being creative and flexible with that and honoring what's true for your student on that day in that moment.
All right, thank you. So, Julie, when a parent suspects their child may have APD, what are some key questions that they need to ask teacher and support staff, particularly for children who are middle or in high school?
It's a great question. It's really important to foster a fabulous relationship with your teachers and the support staff. Parents are going to want to ask questions regarding what they're seeing in the classroom. Are they seeing the student have difficulty in noisy situations? Are they having trouble hearing? Are they being less successful if they don't have those visual supports available to them? You also want to ask the teachers and the support staff what types of supports are available in the classroom to your child. You want to know if they have the ability to sit closer to where the teacher talks so that they are getting the information without having so much of the background distraction. You also want to ask if they might have a way to provide skeletal notes so that the student knows what's coming and they can see the instructions and the lecture information, but also be able to fill in the blanks of what they need to do. Another thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is asking, especially in high school, middle school, we want to ask the teachers how they are going to help the students self-advocate. We realize that they need the supports. They know they need the supports. The teachers know they need the supports. We all know that, but as children get older, these supports make them stand out and make them feel different. We want to make sure that it's normalized, meaning that it's more accepted and I'm more like other people than what I'm feeling at this moment. We want to support that energy. So ask the teachers how they normalize the use of these supports in the classroom and how they're going to help prepare for self-advocacy.
All right, so Susan, you've helped families and schools work better together. How can parents explain their child's auditory processing challenges in a way that builds understanding and collaboration rather than defensiveness?
Well, in my experience, on both sides of the table, it's approaching teachers as a team. So when this first showed up with my son, he was in the second grade. And instead of saying to the teacher, he needs this and he needs that, and you've got to do this, or demanding things, I said, how can we work together? And who knows, maybe these strategies will help other students. And so when we take an approach that uses words that build collaboration, like, and could we do this? Or next time, could we do that? Instead of, you didn't do this, or you should be doing that with my son, it makes all the difference in the world. And it's about reframing their, let's say, their learning difference as something that's biological. It's not a behavioral thing, but not being defensive about it, because the minute we start putting the blame window or blaming the teacher for something, they sense that immediately. And that's a good way to have it come back at us, and we lack collaboration. If you're writing an email nowadays, I'd say you might even use some tools to help you edit your emails so that they're less, they don't have emotion in them, or the emotion that could cause problems. I mean, I have a sister that I'm working with on the state level. She's intellectually disabled and in a team. And sometimes I have to answer some things or respond to things that trigger me. And that's going to happen to parents all the time. So what I do now is I'll write an email. And sometimes if I know I've been emotional, I'll either have someone read it for me, proof it for me before I hit send, or I will use AI. I will do that sometimes to make sure, is this okay? Can we make this more positive? So again, it's always approaching the staff, the team, your students' team as a team, instead of as an adversary. And if we have that approach as parents or caregivers, that can really set the stage for working together. That I think is key. If you approach it with the sense of, you're not doing the job right for my child, that usually doesn't get the best results.
Well, that's good advice. Thank you, Susan. So, Kimberly, you've sat in many IEP and team meetings. What classroom supports are appropriate for parents to request, and which ones make the biggest day-to-day difference?
Sure. Love this question. I think approaching it from a social model of supporting students with auditory processing disorder is an interesting approach. And circling back to the previous question where I centered the environment, I think one very reasonable request a parent can make in advocacy for the learning conditions of their child is to ask for an acoustic environment audit. to look and understand the space in which the learning is taking place, to look for information around what is the signal to noise ratio, what is the background noise level, and how is the teacher's voice able to cut through or get above that so that it's accessible to the listeners in the classroom, those with and without auditory processing disorders. To think about factors such as reverberation and background noise. Sometimes there are simple solutions such as closing a door or keeping windows closed, or even putting tennis balls on the bottom of chairs to make it, less noisy in the room. These are things that can make a big difference and can help everyone in the classroom. There are also technologies that can be used. It could be helpful to ask the district, do you have sound field amplification available? That's something that, again, everyone in the classroom can benefit from, but it will specifically help the student with auditory processing disorders. As would something such as live captioning. Google Slides will allow you to open up a blank slide deck, and you have an option to turn on live captioning, and your lesson will be transcribed for you in live time on the panel or interactive whiteboard or wherever you might project that slideshow, for anyone in the room to be able to hear your words but also read them at the same time. And I think another reasonable accommodation to ask for would be two things, actually. One is to build in wait time. Our students with auditory processing disorders need that built-in wait time. It's a support for accessibility. It allows information coming in to land, be processed and understood, and also allows for some space and time to formulate a response. And so that's a very helpful thing that all people that interact with students can do. It doesn't take any special equipment whatsoever, just a reminder to provide it. And then also circling back, someone had mentioned earlier, front loading, providing vocabulary, providing guided notes ahead of time. There's a lot that can be done nowadays. We have many AI tools that will help teachers be able to capture vocabulary and just-in-time resources so that our learners with auditory processing disorders have a preview, have dipped their toe in the water of the content before it's coming at them for the first time. Similarly, there are other newer AI capacities that are coming out. Google has Notebook LM, which will take a slide deck or a guide note set and create a visual summary. And that, too, can be very helpful to see something visual and to hear the words of the content ahead of the lesson. So I feel like these are very reasonable accommodations that parents can come to the school and kind of, say, what can we do with these options? How can we use these to support my learner?
So, Julie, you work with college students every day. What is one thing that you wish parents who are raising younger children who are dealing with auditory processing disorder would know about helping to foster their independence, whether it's academically or emotionally, as they go forward?
This is an eye-opening thing that I recognized when I first started working at the college level. I came from public schools for 22 years, and I'm used to what we offered in supports in the classroom. Parents need to make sure that they have built the confidence of their child and also their own confidence in the child's ability to be able to do things on their own. The growth that you see in the first year at college is amazing for all of our students. The students also need to be able to self-advocate for themselves. They need to recognize what helps them, what they have tried in the past that didn't help them, and be able to make sure that they are making use of those accommodations. They need to be able to formally request them if needed, because parents are not the ones that request when they get to the college level. That's on the student because they are considered adults. We also need to make sure that we're validating their efforts to be successful and that the student recognizes that they have the ability and they have the skills, and they don't need somebody to hold their hand through this event, at this transition. They're going to be successful by using the supports that they have used in the past that have helped them through elementary, middle school, and high school. Just know that they are going to have different learning styles than their peers. And this is something they've experienced all through life. But having a difference in their ability does not make them have a weakness or make them less of a person. So we really need to strongly build that confidence.
So, Susan, parents often ask, will my child be all right? And I'm wondering, from your experience, what kinds of strengths do children with APD have, and how can families help nurture those strengths?
They have tremendous strengths in being able to think creatively, and they often focus in on things that they're interested in because they have the ability to really zero in, on their other talents. And I think the most important thing that we need to do as parents is reframe their brain wiring, however they learn, as a learning difference. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just differently wired. You are not broken. You are a specialist, whereas the world is built for generalists, and so you have a skill that is perfect for you. And I think getting them to know, all right, I learn differently than this one and this one. I can't necessarily, remember everything the teacher says without strategies, and all the strategies everyone else is sharing, the other two people are sharing on this the show. It's how do you take the things that work for you and use them in order to be successful for the rest of your life? I think probably the things I would say is, as a parent, instead of focusing on what's wrong with the child, which schools tend to do, we look at their deficits because we have to make them better, look at their gifts and foster those gifts and those strengths and let the child know what they're good at as often as possible. Not to say it's an excuse, but to say you're good at this and this is what we need to foster. And if you do this strategy and this strategy, you can be successful in school. Helping them to become what I call self-regulated learners. I know how to learn. I know how I learn. It may be different than what the person next to me learned, how they learn, but I can do this. And I think that's the key. I know that with the children I have worked with in schools over my entire career, as well as my own son, giving them the tools and letting them know, especially as they get older, just because you need a mind map or a flow chart or you need to record the teacher doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It means your brain is wired differently. And those are the tools you can use not only in Mrs. Smith's class, but for the rest of your life, even when you're working and you're employed. It's depersonalizing that whole thing about, oh, I can't do it the way Johnny does, so there must be something wrong with me. No, there's nothing wrong with you. You just do things differently. And maybe you don't have the best reading skills yet, but you will get there. And I think that reframing, it's not about making excuses and making things easier. It's about, what do I need to do to be successful as a student and eventually as a worker and a human being? And if we focus there starting when they're very young and look at their talents instead of what's wrong with them all the time, I think we're going to have a much better outcome for our students as they enter college and life in general, even if they don't go to college, a trade, whatever it is they choose to do that works for them.
Well, Susan, thank you for that passionate perspective.
I know, I'm really passionate about that.
Well, Kimberly, let's go into this question then. You've watched children with APD grow over the years, and I wonder, when parents are feeling discouraged about their progress, what's one hopeful truth that you want them to hang on to as their child develops through the years?
I think what's really important for parents to realize is that the world is catching up with their child. It is a wonderful time to have a challenge such as auditory processing disorder, and knowing that technology is evolving so quickly and that we are in the space right now where we have the most advocacy we've ever seen for learners with challenges and disability. We also have strong foundational pillars to support the practice and implementation of said tools. We can lean into UDL 3.0 frameworks. We also have, on the ADA level, the WCAG 3.0, which is Web Accessibility Guidelines, to be used to support that our learners have what they need, and that they will be successful and just as successful as the learner next door, that their uniqueness will be continue to be celebrated and appreciated. And in fact, in the future, in our modern world, when they're going off to college, into the workforce and living life, students who are able to quickly embrace technology, assistive technology, technology of any kind, are going to be seen as an asset right? So no longer is that a special thing that is an afterthought. It's actually going to be the default. So reframing once again, disabilities are not necessarily drawbacks. We have abilities within ourselves, in spite of the disability, that allow us to shine and be unique contributors and gifts to the world. So there is the hopeful truth from my perspective.
All right, and that will have to be our final word today. Julie Dunlap, Susan Fitzell, and Kimberly Zajac. Thanks for the knowledge.